Hello, my name is Connie. My brother-in-law married my sister, and instead of building a life, he brought a bulldozer to erase mine. They thought marriage was the key to my childhood home, my roots, my father's bench, my mother's tree. They forged papers, spread rumors, even tried fake eviction notices. But what happens when family calls you fragile, just to steal your foundation? The night smelled of salmon and garlic butter as I walked into the Tacoma Country Club ballroom. Sinatra's voice drifted from the quartet in the corner. Fly me to the moon, blending with the faint buzz of conversation. The chandeliers threw their light across white linens, polished silver, and rows of champagne flutes. My sister Druella stood at the head table in her satin gown, diamonds at her ears catching every flicker of light. She looked like a woman who'd just climbed onto a stage she'd been rehearsing for her entire life. I glanced down at my place card. Constance, supporter. Not just my name, but a title in parentheses, as though I were the sponsor of this union rather than a sister. The others at my table had plain names only. Subtle, but deliberate. It was placed near the service door, a seat close enough to the kitchen for me to smell the plates before they reached the floor. A cousin whispered a joke about me being married to nostalgia, and the laughter was polite but sharp. I smiled, though my stomach tightened. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I took in every detail like a reporter. The glossy photo booth set up in the corner, the projector screen waiting with its frozen blue frame, the gift table stacked with albums. Mortain, my new brother-in-law, paced with the microphone in his hand. His smile was the kind you see on real estate signs, gleaming, rehearsed, unshakable. I promised myself I wouldn't react tonight, no matter how deep the cuts. Measure twice, cut once, my father always said when we built shelves together. Tonight, I would measure everything. Mortain tapped the mic, and the crowd hushed. To new beginnings, he said, his voice carrying like he'd done this speech in 100 living rooms. To ours, and to the land that will carry them. The projector flickered to life. My heart jolted. On the screen was the old Craftsman house by Wright Park, our childhood home, stamped with the words, Future Project in bold letters. Next to it were glossy renderings of a duplex, modern gray siding where cedar shingles once sheltered us. Laughter rippled across the room, a cheer for progress. I kept my eyes on the screen, not letting them see my throat tighten. Mortain continued. We'll unlock value the right way. Someone in the crowd shouted, Location! 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 I leaned toward Druella, my voice low. Since when is home a spreadsheet? She turned her head just enough to meet my eyes, her smile still frozen for the crowd. It's called adulting, Connie. The next slide punched harder than the first. My photograph, taken last year when I was repainting Dad's old bench, flashed up with the caption, Legacy Staging. A guest behind me whispered, Sentimental. The word landed like a stone. I steadied my breath. Dad taught me never to argue from emotion, but from facts. A duplex in that district required multiple permits, possibly a historic review, especially for structures built before 1930. And their rendering ignored the mulberry tree my mother planted in the front yard. Its roots dug deeper than their plans ever could. I scanned the tables. Breyer, the contractor Mortain had bragged about, sat at table 12, checking his watch. I noticed the empty chair meant for Tavros, the developer Mortain whispered about but who never showed. I bit my tongue and smiled for the videographer, letting the camera capture my composure. If tonight was theater, then I would play the silent role that cut deepest. Later, near the gift table, a hostess held out a pen with a sugary smile. Sign here, sweetie. A leather-bound wedding album lay open, a slot waiting for notes of blessing. I flipped toward the back where a vellum page crinkled. Beneath it, a sheet was already half filled, labeled at the top, in delicate script, Deed Acknowledgement. At the bottom, in print so small it could slip past tired eyes, the word quitclaim. My fingers froze around the pen. I lifted the page, feigning interest in the photograph above. I'll take this to better light. Druella appeared behind me, her perfume sharp in my nose. It's just a keepsake line, Connie. I let a smile spread slow. Then you won't mind if I read every word. Her face stayed serene, but her eyes narrowed, just a fraction. I slipped my phone from my purse under the table and snapped a discreet photograph. Timestamp. I noted the notary line left blank. This wasn't the attempt to steal. This was the rehearsal. Conditioning. I slid the pen back across the linen, my hand steadier than I felt. My mama didn't raise a fool, I murmured, almost to myself. She raised a witness. Back at my seat, the circle formed like a slow tide. Aunts and uncles with rehearsed concern leaned in. Homes are expensive to maintain at your age. You'd love a condo with amenities. Think of the freedom. Their voices dripped with honey, but the sting was clear. Mortain leaned over the table, smooth as a salesman. Walkability, equity, adaptive reuse. These are the words of the future. You don't want to drag value down. I folded my hands in my lap, kept my voice calm. If you plan to touch that foundation, you'll need more than a slideshow. Tacoma Code requires permits. 8 on 11 locates. Notice. I can give you the clerk's number. His smile tightened. We handle our paperwork. I met his gaze. I handle mine. We'll compare. Silence prickled the air. One cousin looked away, embarrassed. I noted my next steps silently. Monday at Pierce County Recorder's Office, copies of the deed, the life estate clause, Dad's letters from the cedar trunk, and coffee with Quillon, my neighbor, retired inspector. Hope isn't a plan, I thought. Apaibana documentation is. Later still, I found Druella alone on the balcony, the bay breeze lifting her veil like a ghost. I stepped beside her. Why the rush? I asked softly. She exhaled, eyes on the water. We need a clean start. Then renovate slowly, I offered. Phase it out, no demolition. I'll help with the work, contribute sweat equity, not ownership. It's practical. She turned, the mask of sweetness fading. Connie, it's for your safety. That house isn't fit for you anymore. I'm not a liability, I said evenly. I'm a stakeholder. Her jaw tightened. Just sign the thank you. I smiled, calm as the tide. I will sign, when it reads the truth. For a moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the clink of glassware behind the doors. She turned away, and I knew I had drawn the line. I thought of Dad's bench, Mom's tree, the house that held every memory worth more than their renderings. Monday, I would begin the paper trail. Tonight, I would let them dance. Back inside, a waiter set the album back on the table as the band struck a bright chord. Mortain caught my eye across the room, 2 fingers tapping like a metronome on his glass, a countdown I refused to hear. If they wanted a new beginning, they'd have to go through the middle of me. At 7:10 on Monday morning, I opened my front door to a noise that didn't belong. Fog hung low, the kind that rolls in from Commencement Bay and dampens every sound, except the growl of heavy equipment. There, idling beside my mother's mulberry tree, sat a bulldozer. Its orange paint looked almost obscene against the gray sky. Orange cones lined my curb as if someone else now owned the right to mark my street. 2 laborers were unloading silt fencing from the back of a pickup. A man with a clipboard, Breyer, the contractor I'd seen at the wedding, was scanning the lot like he was about to break ground. I didn't see any perimeter fencing, no fall protection, and most telling of all, No posted demolition permit on the property line. I pulled my phone from my sweater pocket, switched to video, and pressed record. 30 seconds, date and time stamped, panning from the bulldozer to the empty permit board. I spoke into the microphone calmly, quoting Ronald Reagan's line, "Trust, but verify." I stepped off the porch. "Permit number, please?" I asked. Breyer didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Lady, we're just mobilizing." "Mobilizing without a permit looks a lot like trespass," I said evenly. His eyes flicked toward me, annoyed but not surprised. He'd clearly been told to expect resistance. I dialed Tacoma Permitting through 311, set the phone on speaker, and let the ring fill the morning air. "Not my first rodeo," I said, more to myself than to him. While I waited for the clerk, I texted a single line to Druella and Mortain. "Show the permit or stand down." Then I circled the bulldozer, crouched, and snapped a photo of the VIN plate. "Proof matters." The city clerk answered, and Breyer's posture shifted. "No demolition permit has been issued for that address," the clerk said crisply. "Any ground disturbance requires utility locate, 811 ticket, and posted approvals." I repeated her words loud enough for everyone on site. "No permit issued, utility locate required. Asbestos survey and historic screening needed for a 1920 structure." Breyer bristled. "We're here on the owner's instruction." "Ownership doesn't outvote the code," I said. That was when Mortain appeared, walking fast in his blazer, flashing that real estate smile like he was at an open house. "We have a plan," he announced, his voice rising above the engines. "Plans don't beat law," I said, keeping my eyes steady on him. "Paper does." The clerk gave me a service request number. I wrote it down in my notebook, neat and legible. "Please dispatch an inspector," I added. Then I called Tacoma Police's non-emergency line and logged a civil standby request, just in case this escalated. My voice stayed level. I looked at Mortain. "Hope isn't a plan," I said. "Documentation is." The clerk promised an inspector was on the way. Breyer sighed, muttered to his crew, and jerked his thumb at the machine. The dozer coughed and shut down. No theatrics, just a small victory won by steady words and statutes. While the men sulked by the truck, Quillon shuffled over from across the street. He wore his old city inspector windbreaker, hands in his pockets. His eyes scanned the cones, the machines, the missing permit board. He took out his own phone and started snapping photos. "No posted permit," he murmured. "No demo. Period." "Good morning to you too," I said, though my relief was clear. He tilted his head toward the bulldozer. "They're testing your resolve. Secure your chain of title. Find the life estate language if it exists. Put it in front of a judge if you have to." I pulled out my notepad and wrote my next steps in order. Pierce County Recorder to pull deeds and wills. Auditor for certified copies, then Varick, my attorney, to prepare a lis pendens. "Don't argue volume," Quillon said softly. "Argue statute." "Roger that," I replied. I thanked him, promised to send copies to the inspector when they arrived, and walked back inside to grab my keys. My breath steadied. Tactical, not emotional. That was the only way to play this. By mid-morning, I stood under the fluorescent lights of the Pierce County Auditor's office. Rows of index kiosks hummed. A clerk named Marcy looked up from her desk, her coffee cup leaving a ring on a stack of papers. I typed my family's name into the grantor-grantee index, the screen lit with entries, the original warranty deed, a refinancing a decade later, and then, there it was, a probated will. I clicked. The scanned page appeared, and Dad's handwriting leapt off the screen. He had left me a life estate, the right to occupy until my death or voluntary waiver. No one could extinguish it without due process. I leaned closer. His neat block letters echoed the letter I still kept in the cedar chest at home. My throat tightened, but I forced my hands steady. For anyone listening in, I explained the difference to myself. A quitclaim deed transfers whatever interest you have, with no guarantees. A warranty deed is stronger, with covenants of title. And a life estate, well, that was armor. I printed certified copies, raised seal glinting under the counter light. I asked Marcy for book and page numbers, recorder's instrument ID, and scanned them straight to my cloud folder. For backup, I bought a $2 flash drive and saved them again. Redundancy is policy. Paper beats talk, I told Marcy. She smiled. And stamped paper beats paper. I left with the documents heavy in my bag, but light in my chest. I texted Varick the file names and instrument IDs. Subject line, life estate attached. Prepare list pendants. For the first time in days, empowerment settled in my bones. Back in my car, I began pressing the advantage. I drafted an email addressed to Breyer, Mortain, and Druella. Any activity before permit, plus resolve of life estate, will trigger police report and civil action. I copied a generic loan officer address I'd found on one of Mortain's flyers, a subtle signal. I uploaded the morning video and the certified copies to a shared folder, then wrote a brief timeline, dates, names, statute references, each entry clean. I planned to send it to the inspector for their case file. Mortain's text came quickly. You're overreacting. I typed back one line. I'm reading. I set a calendar hold for a City Hall Historic Review inquiry. I scheduled reminders to call 811 myself. If anyone dug without marking, it would be logged in the state database. In America, the loudest person isn't always right. The most prepared usually is. When I returned home, the house smelled faintly of cedar. I walked straight to the trunk by the porch, lifted the heavy lid, and found what I'd left years ago, an envelope addressed in my father's block letters. I held it in my hand and knew what came next. If the law was my shield, Dad's words would be my sword. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the lace curtains in my living room, streaking across the cedar trunk that had sat beneath the window for decades. Its hinges squeaked as I lifted the lid, and the smell of old wood wrapped around me like a memory that refused to fade. Inside lay the envelope I had left untouched for years. My father's handwriting, thick, careful block letters, spelled out my name. I slid it into my hands. The paper felt rough, the ink faded, yet it carried a weight no legal document could match. I pressed my thumb along the seam before opening it, my pulse louder than the faint traffic outside. Measure twice, Connie, and guard the roots, the first line read. My father had written that when his health was failing, but he had written it with purpose, as if he knew this day would come. I thought of his long shifts at the mill, the extra carpentry jobs he took on weekends, and the nights he came home with sawdust still clinging to his hair. Every sacrifice poured into that house. The mortgage was more than bricks and shingles. It was our security, our place in the world. At my age, memories aren't weakness, they're evidence. Robert Frost once wrote, "Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in." My father believed that, and he lived it. This house was proof. I read further. His words cut clean through my worry. No child shall sell or demolish this home without the agreement of all. This roof is more than lumber. It is the memory of your mother's hands and my labor. He reminded us of the mulberry tree Mom planted in the spring of '89, the wooden bench he built when I was 12, and how he considered them anchors of our family. He underlined one line twice. Sign nothing in haste. I whispered as if he were standing there. You knew this fight would come, didn't you? I read the line aloud, steadying my voice. Guard the house. It guards you. Tears welled, not of despair, but recognition. He had prepared me. Preparation, I realized, was his love, left in a form I didn't appreciate until now. I sat back against the trunk, letter still in hand, and the smell of mulberry blossoms carried me to another time. I was 10, sitting on the bench outside his bedroom while he lay sick. My homework spread across my knees. I watched the curtains flutter with spring air and blossoms drifting through the screen. Druella sat beside me then, braiding my hair, promising, "We'll keep this house together, Connie." Always. The memory ached. Then, she believed it. Now, money had corroded that promise. It was the paradox I couldn't untangle. How people change, how ambition erases what they once swore. Maybe I was naive, I told myself. But naive once isn't a life sentence. I looked out at the mulberry tree through the window, its branches stretched wide, a survivor of decades. That tree wasn't just sentimental, it was evidence. Historic review committees listened to facts like planting dates, community memories, long-standing roots. I wrote in my notebook, "Mulberry, planted spring '89. Neighbors to attest." You can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. That tree, that bench, this letter, they would become part of the record. I scanned the letter into my secure folder, adding metadata, date written, phrases highlighted, my father's signature. I labeled it Exhibit A. Alongside it, I saved the certified deed copies and will clause I had pulled earlier. The package was building itself, law and memory braided together. I called Quillon, and his gravelly voice came through the line. "I found Dad's letter," I told him. "Then you found your anchor," he said. "Don't let them spin you loose." I smiled. They won't. The transition inside me was clear. Nostalgia alone could sink me. But memory documented, woven into evidence, that was strength. Sentiment becomes power when you document it. By evening, the house was quiet, except for the tick of the clock. I lit the lamp near the wooden bench and sat where I had sat 1,000 times before. I whispered to the grain in the wood, "They won't bulldoze you." I pulled out a fresh page and wrote to myself, "I am not just defending wood and walls. I am defending every sacrifice embedded here." I taped the note into my notebook, a personal creed I could not forget when exhaustion came. I picked up the phone and called Varick. It went to voicemail, but I spoke clear. "I found my father's letter. We need to integrate it with the legal instruments. This isn't just law, it's legacy." I hung up with no bitterness in my chest. For the first time in days, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. Later, as I washed the dinner dishes, my phone buzzed. A notification from Facebook. Mortain had tagged me in a post with a line that made my jaw set. "Sentimentality blocks progress." The comment section was already swelling, my name dragged through the mud like a headline in bold. I closed my eyes, steadied my breath, and thought, if they want war of words, I'll give them a record of truth. By Tuesday morning, the comments online were still smoldering. Neighbors I had baked pies for at block parties were now writing about my supposed decline, repeating the lines Druella and Mortain had seeded. I didn't jump into the fray. I knew better. I screenshotted everything. Timestamps, URLs, even the way certain phrases repeated like they'd been written off the same script. My old principal used to tell me, "Don't wrestle with pigs, you both get dirty." Instead, I made myself a strong cup of black coffee, opened my notebook, and drew an action map. Lender. Title. City Hall. Each had a box with deadlines, names, and deliverables. I laid out the certified copies I'd collected yesterday. The deed, the will with Dad's life estate clause, and his letter, slid them into a fresh folder marked Exhibit A. On a separate USB, I compiled PDFs, each file name stamped with instrument IDs. Then I drafted a neutral letter titled Notice of Adverse Claim/Equitable Interest. It was dry on purpose, the kind of document that made bankers sit up straighter. In plain terms, it stated that I held a life estate, a right of occupancy that could not be extinguished without due process. I copied it 3 times, slipped it into a manila folder, and breathed deeply. paper over passion. In money fights, paper beats passion. In court, timestamps beat tears. When I stepped outside, the street was quiet. Breyer's crew had cleared out, but bright survey paint marked the sidewalk, white and orange hash lines tracing toward the foundation. They hadn't even filed an 811 ticket, but they were acting like the property was theirs to carve up. On my front door, someone had taped a plastic sleeve with a contractor's business card and proposed start date left blank. Evidence of hurry. I photographed it, front and back, time-stamped. A neighbor waved from across the street.
"Some guy with a laser measure was here yesterday," he called. "Looked like an appraiser." I nodded. That confirmed what I suspected. A construction loan was pending. I spoke softly into my phone's recorder. "If the loan closes, title will have to run prelim. Once my lis pendens is recorded, that title search will choke the file." I texted the photo of the paint to Quillon. His reply came back in seconds. "No posted permit equals no digging." I added 2 new lines to my action map: title prelim and lender compliance. My step count was rising, and so was my pulse, but not from panic, from purpose. By mid-morning, I sat across from Varick at his office. He was old school, the kind of attorney who wore suspenders and still drafted by hand before typing. I slid the folder across. He thumbed through the raised seals, nodded once, and said, "Good." He explained the mechanics while I wrote notes. A lis pendens is a recorded notice of a pending claim, a shadow on title. Any buyer or lender is put on inquiry, meaning they proceed at their own risk. We drafted 3 documents: the lis pendens referencing my life estate and request for injunction, a letter to the title company with exhibits, and a simple notice to lenders. No detail, just a statement that conflicting interests exist. He looked up at me. "No shouting, Connie. Just service." I allowed myself a small smile. Paper moves mountains faster than bulldozers. We submitted the e-recordings together. On his screen, the recorder's instrument numbers popped up one by one, and I felt the way oxygen fills your lungs after holding your breath too long. With the filings live, I knew no clean loan could close without me. Varick scheduled the historic review inquiry for next week. I promised to bring photos of the mulberry tree, Dad's bench, and the original craftsman facade. From there, I walked into the bank branch downtown. Cool air, polished marble floors, the hush of people who believed in policy more than people. I asked to see the branch manager. He greeted me with a professional smile. "We can't discuss any customer file, ma'am." "I'm not asking," I said calmly. "I'm notifying." I handed him the notice packet, each document stamped, exhibits tabbed. I asked him to route it to title and underwriting. He hesitated, then accepted the folder. "A recorded lis pendens is live," I added. "Any advance might implicate risk." He nodded. Policy, not drama. That was all I needed. Banks don't love noise. They love clarity. I gave him clarity. When I returned home, the sky had shifted toward gray. Outside my gate stood Mortain, realtor blazer crisp, phone in hand, and Druella beside him, lips pressed thin. Mortain's voice came smooth. "You scared a lender today." I dropped my keys in my purse and met his gaze. I notified a lender. His smile thinned. "You've made us look bad." I shook my head. "No, I made us look legal." I laid out the facts in quick, calm sentences: life estate, lis pendens, no permits, and if they were trying to claim owner-occupied for better rates while planning a duplex, occupancy misrepresentation was a word that could haunt them. Druella's eyes flashed. "You're embarrassing us, Connie." "You embarrassed yourselves," I said. "I'm just the one writing it down." Morton shifted tone, the guilt play. "Think of family, Connie."
I tapped the purse where Dad's letter lay folded. I am. For a moment, we stood in silence, only the wind moving between us. Then I drew the line, steady and final. Any further mobilization, I'll call police for a civil standby and file for a restraining order. That's not anger. It's procedure. My voice didn't rise, and my feet didn't move. His jaw worked, but no words came. Druella looked away. They turned, walking down the sidewalk with tight shoulders. Just as they rounded the corner, my phone buzzed. A new post on Nextdoor flashed on the screen, my face, my house, with the caption, "Unsafe elder situation, neighbors concerned." I exhaled, gripping the phone. If they couldn't win with paper, they'd try to win with pity. By late morning, I opened Nextdoor and saw my face staring back at me. The headline above it read, "Unsafe elder situation, neighbors concerned." The photo had clearly been snapped from the curb, probably by someone Mortain put up to it. The comments scrolled down like a dripping faucet, each drop sharper than the last. Words like hoarder, confused, and danger to herself repeated with slight variations, clearly designed to build a narrative. One user asked, "Who do we call?" Another chimed in, "Someone should get Adult Protective Services involved." A third said, "If she can't manage a house, she should move." I set my jaw. Justice Brandeis once said, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." If that was true, then my answer was to flood this entire mess with light and receipts. I screenshot every line, recorded URLs, time-stamped the posts, even the user handles. I dropped them into a folder labeled S6 Evidence. My eyes caught a familiar turn of phrase, unlock value, adaptive reuse. Realtor buzzwords Morton had thrown around at the wedding. A new account was parroting him almost word for word. I didn't accuse, I documented. I drafted a factual reply but didn't post it yet. It was clean, not emotional. Permit status, life estate clause, city contact information. The facts were my ammunition, but timing was my shield. I would release them when it mattered. By early afternoon, I filed a report with the platform moderators. I wrote that the posts were targeted harassment and spread false rumors of elder exploitation. I attached screenshots, cited the community guidelines word for word, and sent it in. Next, I called Tacoma Police's non-emergency line. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke clearly. "I'm competent, safe, and have all my paperwork in order. I'd like a note logged in case further false reports come in." They thanked me and gave me a case reference number. I followed up with an email to City Communications and the permitting office, including the service request number I'd filed when the bulldozer appeared. I asked them to note that public posts were falsely claiming approved demolition. Then I drafted a one-page fact sheet for my neighbors. Simple. Bullet points. Permit requirements. Historic review triggers for homes from the 1920s. The 8111 call before you dig rule. Educational, not defensive. On the phone later, a clerk reassured me. "We'll note the file." "Thank you," I replied. Clarity prevents chaos. That steadiness carried me until my phone rang again. Druella. Her voice sounded soft, but her words were barbed. "People are worried about you," she said, slipping into the gaslight script she'd perfected. She framed the bulldozing as safety. "The stairs are steep, Connie. You get winded." I kept my tone level. My physical exam last month showed no concerns, and I've completed a home safety checklist. "You know that." She pushed harder. "You're fixated on the past." "I'm focused on the record," I said. "Permits, deeds, instruments." Her sigh hissed through the phone. "Just sign the thank you. It's ceremonial." "A quitclaim deed," I answered, "is not a ceremony. You're making a scene." "I'm making a file." Silence stretched. Then she tried guilt. You used to trust me. You asked for trust, I said. I asked for paperwork. She faltered. I ended it clean. No more decisions about me without me. From now on, we talk in writing. After hanging up, I texted her the same message, creating a record she couldn't twist later. With the weight of that call still lingering, I returned to next door. It was time to own the narrative. I posted my fact sheet. No names, no blame, just facts. I listed that no demolition had been approved, cited my life estate clause, and explained permit requirements. I attached 2 photos, the empty permit board and the mulberry tree with the caption, "Planted in 1989. I invited neighbors to check historic review resources if they wanted more information. The responses came quickly. One neighbor replied, "Didn't know about 811. Call before you dig," I wrote back. "It saves lives in lawsuits." Another added, "Thanks for the sources." Then Quillan, my retired inspector neighbor, weighed in. No permit displayed equals no demo. His authority carried weight. The temperature of the thread cooled. I flagged one defamatory reply. The moderators removed it in minutes. I thanked them once, then logged off. Don't feed the fire. In America, the loudest person wins the minute. The most prepared person wins the day. Still, words have a way of crawling under your skin. I sat down and drafted a cease and desist letter addressed to Mortain and Druella. I wrote plainly that their false statements implying incapacity were defamatory and harmful. I copied Varick, my attorney. The tone was crisp, not theatrical. I added a professional boundary. If Druella leveraged her hospital position to imply medical authority about me, I would notify compliance, not to punish her, only to protect professional lines. The text thread lit up again. Mortain, you're hurting family. Me, I'm protecting it from bad decisions and bad faith. Druella, you used to trust me. Me, you asked for trust. I asked for paperwork. I printed a small card and taped it inside my storm door for welfare checks, emergency contacts, physician's number, and a note affirming my competency. De-escalation by readiness. That night, as the sun dropped, I sat at my desk drafting speaker notes for the historic review inquiry. 90 seconds, clear, no adjectives, just dates and statutes. Facts could carry more weight than any plea. Headlights suddenly washed across my living room. A police cruiser slowed to a stop at my curb. 2 officers stepped out and walked up the path. Someone had called in a welfare check. A concerned neighbor. I set my file on the chair beside me and picked up Dad's letter. They wanted me framed as fragile. Instead, they'd meet me prepared. When the knock came, I was ready. The cruiser headlights still glowed against my front porch as I opened the door, file tucked under one arm, Dad's letter in the other. 2 officers stood there, polite but wary, the porch light catching the edge of their badges. "Evening, officers," I said. "Who reported and what was the stated concern?" "Anonymous welfare call," one answered. "May we speak a minute?" "Absolutely. Here's my documentation." I handed over the folder with deed copies, life estate clause, physician note, and service request numbers. "Here's my doctor's statement, and here's the city's intake for the permit complaint." They flipped through each page as I explained the facts. No posted demolition permit, a bulldozer mobilizing without an 811 ticket, my life estate right of occupancy. "I'm safe, competent, and requesting civil standby if another disturbance happens," I said clearly. One officer nodded, pen scratching on his notepad. "You've been thorough, ma'am. We'll note this on our body cam and give you a case number." "Thank you. Civility isn't weakness, it's strategy." They thanked me for being organized. I texted the case number to Varick and Quillan before locking up, then set 2 alarms on my phone, one for City Hall, one for my neighbor outreach. The house settled around me, not in defeat, but in preparation. By Wednesday morning, the kitchen table looked like a command center. I built a 1-inch packet with a cover sheet listing my address and parcel number. Behind it, a table of exhibits, Deed, will, dad's letter excerpts, photos of the mulberry tree and wooden bench, a date-stamped still of the bulldozer idling, and the city service request. I drafted 90-second speaker notes, focused and stripped of adjectives. 3 points, I wrote. 1. No posted permit. Mobilization without 801 locates. 2. Historic merit indicators. 1920s craftsman, original facade, bench, and tree as community markers. 3. Life estate rights. Demolition would impair a protected property interest. I called Quillon, and he rehearsed me like a coach. Stick to dates, instruments, thresholds. Don't let them drag you into adjectives, Ms. Connie. Yes, sir, I said. I printed 10 copies of the packet. For the clerk, commissioners, staff, even the opposition. A few extras for journalists. Then I texted Nerida, my florist neighbor, a template for a support letter. She would rally others with bullet points. Tree planted in 1989, bench used for neighborhood book swaps, annual porch light social gatherings. Documentation, I thought, is a love language when your audience is government. By mid-morning, Nerida and I were walking door to door. She carried her clipboard like a bouquet, speaking with pride, not pity. We're preserving a shared place, she told neighbors, not freezing time. I asked questions designed for memory. What year did you first see the mulberry blossom? Do you have a photo sitting on our porch bench? Signatures began filling the sheet. Names, addresses, years on the block. One neighbor frowned. Didn't know demolition needed a special review. Homes from the 1920s often do, I said. This isn't red tape, it's memory tape. Another, a veteran with careful eyes, added his name. We sat on that bench after my chemo. Put me down in support. By late morning, 20 households had signed. Nerida formatted the joint letter on her shop computer, printed it on letterhead with a tiny mulberry icon, and handed it to me warm from the printer. I tucked it behind Dad's letter in the packet, labeled it Exhibit N. The folder felt heavier, and so did I, but in the best way. I arrived early at City Hall that afternoon. The hearing room smelled of varnish and coffee. A placard read, Demolition Alteration Review. I signed in as a speaker and handed packets to the clerk. Across the aisle, Mortan sat in a charcoal blazer, jaw tight. Breyer leaned on a clipboard, fidgeting. I nodded once, neutral. The staff presented their report, age of structure, potential historic features, absence of a posted permit, proposed duplex plans. The commissioners listened with folded hands. Then public comment opened. I stepped up with 3 copies in hand, pulse steady. I'm Connie, the resident at address. 3 facts. 1. No posted permit. Mobilization occurred without 811 locates. 2. The House meets triggers for historic review. 1920s craftsman, original porch bench, community use evidenced by photographs. 3. I hold a life estate right of occupancy. Demolition would impair a protected interest. I laid Dad's letter excerpt and the neighbor's joint letter atop the staff packet. This is not sentiment, it's documented community value. Quillon followed, his voice firm. No demo without permit, safety plan absent. Historic screening advisable. His words hit with the weight of authority. Nerida read aloud the closing line of the neighbor's letter. We are not against growth. We are for memory with dignity. I saw heads nod among the commissioners. The chair tapped her pen, then spoke. Given evidence, staff will initiate historic review. No demolition until review is complete. Applicant must return with permits and screenings. The gavel came down. Relief washed over me. Not gloating, not triumph. Gratitude. The sound was a door closing on the bulldozer. In the corridor afterward, a reporter snapped photos of the mulberry tree picture. He asked for a comment. I gave one line. We followed the rules. The rules protected us. Morton pushed past. Phone pressed hard against his ear. Briar avoided my eyes. Narita squeezed my hand. Quillon tipped his cap. I emailed Varric the outcome, CC'd city staff, then uploaded the scanned neighbor's letter and agenda to my cloud folder. Government moves slow until it doesn't. Be there. Be brief. Be documented. By dusk, I was home again. The house felt like it was breathing easier. I ran my hand along Dad's bench and whispered thanks. When I turned to go inside, a canary yellow paper flapped on my front door, taped at eye level. Bold letters screamed, "Notice." They had lost at City Hall. Now they would try to win at my doorstep. The yellow paper trembled in my hand as I peeled it from the front door. Someone had taped it at eye level, bold letters shouting, "Notice," as if shouting could make it real. I read line by line. Typos scattered across the page, no court caption at the top, no cause number, and the deadline of 72 hours, a timeline Washington law doesn't recognize for evictions. It was the kind of forgery that preys on fear, hoping I wouldn't notice the details. But details are where I live. I pulled out my phone and compared the language against a sample unlawful detainer notice I had saved months ago, when I started anticipating tactics like this. The mismatches glared. No service affidavit, no process server signature, and wording lifted straight from a landlord blog instead of the revised Code of Washington. I photographed both sides, timestamped them, and slid the notice into a clear sleeve labeled Exhibit B. For extra measure, I dialed the number printed at the bottom. It went to a generic voicemail, the kind that avoids giving a company name. I logged the call time and saved the recording. "If it ain't stamped or numbered, it ain't real," I muttered, more for myself than anyone else. I locked the door behind me, set my phone to record, and placed the fake notice squarely on the kitchen counter. It sat under the light like a piece of evidence in a courtroom. I poured a glass of water, sat down at the table, and steadied my breathing. First things first, verification. Paper beats panic. I called the Pierce County Superior Court clerk, gave my address, and asked if any eviction case had been filed under my name. The clerk checked and confirmed. Nothing on record. I jotted the clerk's initials and the time of the call in my notebook. Next, I called Varric. I emailed him scans of the notice while we spoke. "It's fraudulent," he said without hesitation. "I'll draft a cease and desist citing harassment and attempted interference with your life estate. Forward it to Tacoma Police, too." I left a message with the Washington Attorney General's Consumer Protection Line, then logged a supplement with Tacoma Police non-emergency, tying it to the welfare check case number from last night. Each entry went into my growing file. Finally, I forwarded the notice to city permitting staff with the subject line, "Fraudulent notice, posted during pending historic review." It was important they saw the pressure being applied in parallel to the public process. I tabbed the notice into my City Hall packet under S21. Redundancy is policy. Fraudsters thrive on noise. Clerks respect statutes. At 8:15 p.m., the knock came. 2 raps, confident, like they owned the wood beneath their knuckles. I opened the door to find Druella and Mortain standing under the porch light. She wore her scrubs, still smelling faintly of antiseptic. He carried himself like a salesman walking into a pitch. "We need to talk," Druella said. I stepped back, leaving the door wide open to the light outside for safety, and gestured them in. We walked to the kitchen table. The knife grooves Dad carved when fixing hinges years ago were still etched into the wood, scars of labor and care. The evening breeze carried a faint whiff of mulberry through the window, as if the house itself were listening. Morton slid into a chair, his voice smooth. "That notice is standard procedure." I pulled the plastic sleeve from the counter and slid it across. "It's counterfeit, no case number, no court caption, wrong timeline for Washington," I confirmed with the clerk. Druella crossed her arms. "Connie, you're being difficult." I'm being documented, I replied. I laid my hand flat on the grooves in the wood. 4 non-negotiables. 1. No entry without my written consent. 2. No contractors on my property. 3. All communications in writing. 4. Any further fraudulent postings will result in a police report and a temporary restraining order. This kitchen is a record, I added quietly. You don't get to erase records. Morten leaned forward, changing tactics. Think of family, Connie. This isn't about paperwork, it's about progress. I lifted my eyes to his. Permit numbers, instrument IDs, and statutes aren't progress. They're law, and I have them. While they sat stiff in their chairs, I picked up the phone and called Tacoma Police non-emergency. Calmly, I reported the fraudulent notice while they listened. Yes, ma'am, the officer said. Retain the document. Here's your case number. We can send a patrol to document. Please do, I replied, reading the number aloud as I wrote it down. Even as I hung up, Varick's cease and desist hit their phones, the subject line bold. Demand to cease harassment, false notices, protected occupancy. I looked at them both. Next step is a temporary restraining order if you or any agent posts something like this again. Morten smirked. You wouldn't. I met his stare. I already did the part where I wouldn't. Silence stretched across the table. I printed a front door statement, a plain sheet with bold letters. Historic review pending. No contractors permitted. All communications by counsel. I taped it on the inside glass of the storm door, where it could be read from the porch. They left with jaws clenched, not a word spoken. I didn't watch them go. Instead, I scanned the fake notice at 600 dpi and saved it into my archive. By 9, the house was quiet again. I installed a new porch camera, linked it to my phone, and set audio chimes for every motion. I created a shared folder Varick could access with all case numbers, recordings, and exhibits. Then I drafted a FAQ for neighbors. How permits work, what a life estate means, why fake notices erode communities. I didn't plan to publish it yet, but preparation was part of my rhythm. I boiled water for tea and gave myself 10 minutes. I breathed, repeating Maya Angelou's words. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I texted Quillan. Fraud notice posted. Verified fake. Reported and filed. His reply came fast. A thumbs-up emoji and the words, keep it boring. Boring wins. I wiped the table clean, placed Dad's letter at the center, and wrote tomorrow's to-do list. Confirm inspector site visit. Prep answers for potential press questions. I promised myself one thing. I would not become the villain in their story. I would remain the record keeper in mine. Just as I set down my pen, my email pinged. The subject line chilled me. You don't know me, but I know Morten. Inside were screenshots, dated months before the wedding. Lines of text leapt off the screen. Marry the house, not the girl. If truth is a blade, this was the sharpened edge. Dawn broke gray and heavy, the kind of sky that presses low over Tacoma. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee, the glow of my laptop pulling me into the day. The email from last night still blinked in my inbox. You don't know me, but I know Morten. Attached were files that could change everything. I downloaded each attachment, saved them into a folder I labeled S9 Motive, and wrote down the hash values and timestamps. Chain of custody matters. And I wasn't about to hand them an escape hatch by being sloppy. I opened the screenshots one by one. The texts were dated months before the wedding. Morten, in his own words, to a contact. Marry the house, not the girl. Duplex pays itself. Another. She'll fold if we move fast. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I didn't let it push me into anger. I wrote a provenance note. Sender's name redacted, claimed to be a former co-worker of Morten. I asked them for a short Zoom call, voice only, off camera, just to verify identity. Then I forwarded the entire packet to Varick. Subject line, motive evidence, pre-publication review. My message was simple: check for defamation risk. Tell me what's safe to disclose. Before shutting the folder, I created a timeline. It braided every event from the wedding toast to the bulldozer, the fake eviction notice, and now this smoking gun. Each entry linked to exhibits, recorder instrument IDs, welfare check case numbers, clerk initials. Truth without a paper trail is just opinion. Truth with a paper trail is protection. An hour later, the anonymous sender's voice came through my laptop speaker. It was distorted slightly, but steady. "Why share this?" I asked. "He laughed about flipping your place," the witness answered. "I couldn't swallow it." I pressed. "Then let's do it right." Names redacted, facts intact. They confirmed details only Mortan would know. The first name of developer Tavros, Breyer's quoted demo window, the lender acronym he bragged about. I asked for metadata from the screenshots, device model, capture times. They promised to send originals and an affidavit through Varick. I logged the call's duration, marked the IP as masked, and attached it to my chain of custody note. I didn't promise outcomes, only accuracy. Afterward, I texted Quillon and Narita. "I may need community quotes today, only if you're comfortable." Both agreed cautiously. No pressure. Informed consent mattered. I packed my binder, the one already labeled motive, and set a meeting with Evadne, the local reporter, for noon at a coffee shop on 6th Avenue. At the coffee shop, the air smelled of espresso and baked muffins. Evadne arrived carrying a small recorder and a notepad. We sat by the window. I slid the binder across the table. "Ground rules," I said. "Quotes on the record, neighbors only with consent, documents first." She nodded. I told her the arc. It started with the wedding toast and a quitclaim slip, then the bulldozer without a permit, Dad's letter and the mulberry tree, the lender and title trap, public shaming online, a fake eviction notice, City Hall siding with evidence. And now this, his motive in writing. We flipped to the texts. "These are dated before the engagement party," I said. "Notice the slang, unlock value, land carry, his signature phrases." Evadne frowned. "Why go public?" "Because the bulldozer was public," I said. "So is the truth." "Any comment from them?" she asked. "We'll offer equal time," I replied. "On paper." I gave her copies, not originals. I included Varick's number for legal vetting. I stressed, no adjectives, no diagnosis, just dates, permits, money motives. She asked about neighbor quotes. I texted Narita a consent form. Quillon agreed to a simple factual statement, no character attacks. It was enough. That afternoon, I sent a text to Druella and Mortain. "A story may run tonight. You have until 6 to provide a factual response. I'll forward it to the reporter." Minutes later, my phone rang. Mortain's voice was sharp. "You'll regret this." I cut him off. "Put it in writing by 6. Then I hung up. Druella sent a long message. "You're tearing the family apart." I typed back. "I'm publishing documents. You can publish yours." When 6 o'clock came, nothing had arrived. I forwarded their silence to Evadne, labeling it, "Declined, no factual correction provided." Transparency was its own kind of armor. For my neighbors, I drafted a short explainer about elder exploitation tactics, pressure disguised as safety, fake notices meant to intimidate, redefining care to mean surrender. People over 60 know those tricks. They've seen them in their own families. I sent Evadne the audio clip from City Hall where the commission chair ordered a historic review. A clean soundbite, a public record. At 8:15 p.m., the Tacoma Ledger site went live. The headline read, "Bulldozer before permit. Neighbors rally as life estate cloud meets duplex plans." I clicked, read the leady twice. The article quoted Quillon, "No demo without permits," and Nerida, "We're for memory with dignity." It included a blurred screenshot from the texts, dates visible but names concealed. I exhaled, relief mixed with resolve, my phone lit with texts from neighbors. "Didn't know about life estates. Thank you." "Glad to share resources," I replied. Evadne messaged, "Story updated with your timeline graphic, clear as a bell." I forwarded the link to Varric, who had already approved the framing. Then I printed a PDF copy of the article, slipping it into my binder. Public notice mattered. Lenders paid attention to what went public. I signed off the night with one thought: you don't yell a rumor silent, you publish it quiet. At 9:02, a diesel engine grumbled 2 blocks away. A text from Breyer appeared on my phone. "We're mobilizing at 7 a.m. per owner." A second text from Quillon followed. "Inspector alerted. Be ready." They were coming with noise. I was waiting with numbers. The street woke with the groan of diesel before the sun had burned off the fog. Breyer's flatbed nosed around the corner, rattling like it owned the block. I was already on my porch, phone raised, timestamp overlay glowing red in the corner of the screen. The bulldozer sat heavy on its trailer, chains creaking as the crew prepared to unload. But then, another sound, tires crunching on asphalt. An inspector's truck slid to the curb and parked nose to nose with the flatbed. The man stepped out, steel-toe boots landing before the dozer's treads ever touched concrete. I felt the scales tip. I narrated steadily into my camera. No posted demo permit, no safety fence, no asbestos survey notice on site. The inspector asked, clipped and direct, "Permit board?" One of Breyer's men shrugged. "Owner has it." I stepped closer to the property line, voice level. "Owner doesn't beat code." I kept my body visible, my hands free, breathing slow through my nose. "Breathe through the first 10 seconds, I reminded myself. Older wisdom still served. I texted the scene to Varric and Quillon, typed simply, "On site, inspector present." Then I slipped the phone into my pocket and watched. The inspector opened his clipboard, reading from a printed checklist. "Permit number." No. 811 utility locate. No. Erosion control plan. No. Asbestos survey for 1920 structure. Another muttered, "No." Each failure landed like a nail in their coffin. I captured nods and short phrases on video, evidence, not argument. Breyer tried to salvage ground. "We're just mobilizing." The inspector didn't blink. "Mobilization is work if it disturbs soil." I pointed at the white spray paint still on the grass from earlier in the week. "Survey marks already laid. That's disturbance." Breyer's jaw tightened. "We'll get it posted." "You'll get a stop work first," the inspector answered flatly. I flipped open my small notebook, jotting the date, time, badge number, quotes, and positions. This was a trail a judge could follow without confusion. The inspector tore a sheet from his pad, stamped it, and pressed it against my fence. The red stop work order fluttered in the breeze, loud as a siren, though no sound left it. It snapped against the wood like a flag staking its claim. He read aloud, voice carrying to both crews and neighbors. "City code sections require permit display, utility locates, hazard surveys, and historic review. All work must cease until compliance." "Copy," I said. Breyer barked back, "We'll be back." The inspector's tone sharpened. "With permits, or not at all?" I raised my phone again, photographing the order front and back, making sure to capture the instrument number. I emailed it to myself, subject line S10 stop work, and backed it up to my shared folder. Breyer made 2 quick calls from the edge of the truck, voice low, while the bulldozer engines sputtered to silence. Music to my paperwork. I looked at the inspector. "You protected code? Code protects people." He gave a short nod. Quillon crossed the street a few minutes later, windbreakers zipped against the chill. He greeted the inspector with a nod only peers could trade, respect without words. He bent down, pointing at the mulberry's root zone. Any digging here risks utilities and damages a protected tree. The inspector jotted it on his pad. Quillan turned toward my phone, speaking on record. No posted permit observed, no 8111 ticket displayed. Structure age triggers historic screening. Demo moratorium until review. The inspector confirmed each point on his body cam. My video stayed steady, not dramatic, parallel evidence to his. Quillan leaned close as the inspector walked off. Keep your story boring and your documents loud. Boring wins, I said. I added his statement into the margin of my timeline, alongside the recorder instrument IDs and welfare check case number. The braid of paper was tightening, strand by strand. Neighbors trickled from porches and sidewalks, drawn by the machines now silenced. I handed out a one-page fact sheet I'd prepared. Permit basics, historic triggers, life estate definition. Clear, short sentences. No names, no blame. So they needed all this before the dozer showed up? One neighbor asked. Before the cones even hit the curb, I replied. Breyer tried to regain footing, raising his voice. This is a misunderstanding, folks. We're here to improve the neighborhood. I didn't answer. The red paper already had. Back inside, I posted a 2-sentence update on the neighborhood app, linking the city code sections. Then I logged off. Feeding the thread was their game, not mine. I emailed the red notice to bank and title company addresses I'd flagged from earlier research. A gentle but unmistakable signal. Risk just increased. Don't outshout a bulldozer. Outdocument it. By mid-morning, the street had quieted. The dozer was chained back on its trailer. Crew members smoked cigarettes by the cab, shoulders slumped. Mortain was nowhere to be seen. I gathered the papers into my binder, slid the new stop work tab into place, and sat on the porch bench. The mulberry's leaves stirred above me, rustling like approval. The victory wasn't about me. It was about a process that had teeth. The inspector did his job, the law stood taller than any machine, and the neighbors saw it unfold with their own eyes. I took a breath and thought, this house isn't just memory. It's precedent. My phone buzzed against the wood. A voicemail was waiting, voice careful, measured. Miss Connie, the loan officer said, we need to discuss a file that may involve your property rights. When money calls in a careful voice, something's breaking loose. The branch manager put me on speaker and said the word every flipper hates. Pause. His voice echoed through the line, flat and procedural. An underwriting associate cleared her throat before speaking. Ma'am, for the record, this call is informational only. We can't discuss a customer's file with you directly. I'm not asking you to, I said calmly, pen ready over my legal pad. I'm here to make sure your risk team has what's already public record. A life estate recorded in Pierce County. A lis pendens tied to my occupancy rights, a municipal stop work order posted on my fence. I read out the recorder instrument IDs and the notice number from the red order. As I spoke, I emailed them the PDF packet, subject line, recorded interests, for risk review. The manager's tone shifted, a hair less casual. We'll need to review the title conditions. I've already clouded title legally, I replied. Paper, not panic. The underwriter broke in, her words clipped. We see the lis pendens. That triggers an internal pause. I wrote down the exact phrase, internal pause. Then you know, I said evenly, that any draws against a construction note increase exposure. I didn't accuse, I didn't plead, I documented. Banks don't fear feelings. They fear filings. An hour later, my inbox chimed with a formal email. Funding paused pending resolution of recorded interests. I slid it into a folder labeled S11 Stop Funding. I forwarded the message to Varick and copied city staff, a quiet FYI. I CC'd the title company intake address I'd used weeks earlier. It wasn't just courtesy, it was pressure, with a smile. The phone rang again, the manager, still careful. If we can't verify consents or permit compliance, our policy is decline. I appreciate clarity, I answered. For your file, here are the historic review minutes from Wednesday. I sent them over while we spoke. By end of day, a second email landed. Withdrawal of conditional approval. Underwriting cited 3 reasons: clouded title, pending historic review, and municipal stop work. I saved the PDF and exported a timeline graphic for my binder, S1 through S11, each filing marked with a small icon. It looked like a chain. Money talks, policy speaks, and their policy had just spoken loud enough to stop steal. The title company weighed in next. Their email came with a formal tone that left no wiggle room. A requirements list to the owner, with me copied thanks to my prior notice. Recorded release of the list pendants. Written consent of the life estate holder. Proof of permits. Asbestos and lead clearance. Outcome of historic review. Without them, the note said, we cannot insure. I didn't gloat. I simply attached the life estate clause again and noted that I would not consent to demolition. In the margin of my notebook, I wrote, no title insurance equals no loan closing, no builder's risk equals no contractors. It was an equation even Breyer would understand. I sent a polite courtesy email to him anyway. Per attached, insurer requires resolution prior to any disturbance. It wasn't for his benefit, it was for the record. Then I printed 3 sets of everything and filed them into a tabbed accordion. Bank, title, city, court. A quiet arsenal of paper. At 3:40 p.m., Evadne's name popped onto my phone. She had forwarded a leak from a neighborhood source. The attachment made my hands go cold. An email chain between Mortain and Tavros, the developer, dated 3 weeks before the wedding. I read each line, highlighter in hand. Demo first, list the dirt immediately, target out-of-state cash. Grandma tenant won't be a problem if we move fast. Duplex ROI assumes 0 occupancy by Q3. I checked the headers, confirmed server stamps. I forwarded the chain to Varick for authentication, affidavit, source statement, and defamation scrub before public mention. I texted Evadne, we use dates and policies, not adjectives. She replied quickly, copy. I'll update tonight's piece if legal clears. I filed the chain into my binder under S20 through I emails and cross-referenced it with the earlier S9 texts. Motive plus plan. The matrix was complete. The fallout came fast. Druella called first, her voice cracking. He says you tanked the financing. The filings did, I said. Not me. She tried again. Do you even hear yourself? You're killing our future. No, I said evenly. I'm keeping mine alive. Minutes later, Mortain left a voicemail, his tone dripping with manufactured sorrow. You don't understand business. You've made a terrible mistake. I saved the message and forwarded it to Varick. Evidence of harassment belonged in the file. I sent one boundary text to both of them. All communication in writing. Any future fake notices equals TRO. No sermons, just policy. Then I crafted a 2-line update for neighbors. City stop work remains active. Lender paused, withdrew per public filings. No names. No glee, just facts. Never interrupt an opponent who's making your case for you. Document it. I walked outside and sat on Dad's bench. The wood was warm from the sun. For the first time in days, I felt the house exhale. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was breathing room. Dusk pulled shadows across the yard when my laptop pinged. A new email. Subject line. Request to discuss alternatives to demolition. It was from Tavros's assistant. Seconds later, another ping. Mortaine's scheduling system sent me a copy of an order. Contractors assigned to secure the site at dawn. When money retreats, schemes get creative. At 8:05 a.m., I spotted the white pickup slowing by my curb. Men in orange vests hopped out, one holding a clipboard, the other already dragging plywood from the truck bed. The foreman said evenly, "We're just here to secure the site. Owner's instructions. Locks, boards." I stepped onto the porch, stop work order copy held at chest height. My body camera chimed, logging video as it had every day since the bulldozer first appeared. "You're not demo?" I asked. "No, ma'am, just security." "Security requires permission," I replied, tone firm but low. "You don't have mine. No entry, no boarding, pending historic review and life estate rights." The foreman shifted on his boots, glancing back toward the idling truck. I dialed Tacoma Police non-emergency and requested a civil standby. "Case number?" I asked the dispatcher and wrote it in my notebook. "Look," the foreman said, "we're not here to cause trouble." "Then you'll idle in the street until you leave," I said. As the truck rumbled, I texted Varick, "Time to pull the lever we discussed. You don't have to raise your voice when you can raise your paperwork." By 9, I was on Zoom with the Pierce Heritage Conservancy. On my screen, their counsel adjusted glasses while the program manager nodded politely. I laid out my packet piece by piece: certified deed, dad's letter, city stop work, neighbor's joint letter, photos of the mulberry tree and the bench. "We recommend a preservation easement," the council said. "Runs with the land, protects facade, roofline, contributing features." "Not landmarking," the manager added, "but enforceable by contract and recording." I leaned in. "I want demolition prohibited without conservancy consent and city approval. Include right of inspection. Violations must trigger injunctive relief and fees." The council tapped a pen. "Given the public nature of your case, we can expedite mobile notary this afternoon." E-record with Pierce County today. I touched the photo of the mulberry tree on my desk. Dad's words whispered back, "Guard the roots." Today, roots would be codified. At noon, the notary arrived. She set her journal on my kitchen table, the one still scarred with knife grooves Dad left while fixing hinges. Through Zoom, the Conservancy program manager smiled, pen in hand. I initialed page after page, signing the grant of easement. Varick emailed the legal description, lot and block, and we attached exhibits: porch and bench photos, arborist note on the mulberry, city stop work, neighbor's joint letter. The notary pressed her stamp, ink sharp against the paper. The scanner hummed. Within minutes, the file uploaded to the county recorder. Then, ping. My phone lit with the instrument number, 2025-09-XXXXX. That number changed the board. I printed the confirmation and taped a copy to the inside of my storm door window. In bold, I wrote, "Protected by historic easement. Instrument moi." I emailed the PDF to city permitting, landmark staff, bank and title contacts, and yes, to Mortaine and Druella. Subject line: recorded easement. Demolition prohibited absent consent. I whispered into the kitchen's still air. That's the sound of a door locking in the right direction. By mid-afternoon, Tavros's assistant called. Her tone was softer than Mortaine's usual bravado. "There may be alternatives. An accessory unit in the backyard? Light rehab?" "I'm open to improvements," I said, "as long as they respect the easement and life estate. All proposals must go through Conservancy and City." Minutes later, Mortaine's texts rattled my phone. "You can't do this." I sent one reply, the instrument number and 3 words. I already did. When I forwarded the easement to the title company, their response came fast: revised requirements list.
Now they demanded conservancy consent for any insured work. It was checkmate on paper. To my neighbors, I sent a short update. Preservation easement recorded. Demolition off the table. Nothing more. I slid all replies under a tab marked S12, easement. The binder's spine groaned under the weight. Compromise isn't capitulation when the non-negotiables are in ink. At 4, Druella appeared on the porch alone. Her eyes held both anger and something close to fear. I guided her to the bench Dad built. "We needed the money," she said, voice breaking. "I know you're scared," I told her. "But family doesn't mean foreclosing on one of us." She stared at the mulberry tree, leaves shimmering in the breeze. "There's one door left," I offered. "Phase interior repairs within easement rules. Apply for grants, tax credits. Respect my right of occupancy. I'll help with applications, but I won't sign away the house." "You closed every door," she whispered. "I closed the wrong one," I answered, nodding toward the street where the trucks had idled. A mulberry leaf drifted onto her knee. She brushed it away, stood, and walked toward the sidewalk. She didn't turn back. I didn't chase. Boundaries are love with edges. At 4:48 p.m., my phone buzzed. A group text from Nerida lit the screen. Neighbors meeting 9 a.m., Sunday. Bring coffee, cameras, copies of the article. If they show up again, we show up together. I looked at the taped confirmation on my storm door, the red order still fluttering on the fence, and Dad's bench beneath me. Paper had drawn the line. Tomorrow, the block would hold it. By 9 sharp on Sunday morning, folding chairs dotted the curb like a parade in reverse. Nerida arrived first with her thermos and a stack of clipboards. Quillon hauled out a battered cooler and set it by the mulberry tree. The red stop work order still clung to my fence, curling in the breeze, bright as a warning flag. Neighbors came steady after that. Young families with strollers, older couples carrying lawn chairs, veterans in baseball caps. Nerida passed out copies of the Ledger article and the joint support letter they'd signed earlier in the week. She didn't have to say much. Everyone knew why they were here. One neighbor muttered, "We don't have to yell. We just have to sit." I nodded. Sitting is power when it's on the record. I set up my phone on a tripod, live stream locked to cloud storage, captioned, "Documenting, not dramatizing." Quillon cleared his throat and reminded everyone of the plan. One spokesperson, no physical confrontation. Everything logged. Community is insurance you don't pay premiums for until the day you need it. At 10:15, Mortaine's SUV screeched up the block. He jumped out with Breyer at his side and a fresh contractor crew trailing behind. He waved a stack of papers high like a trophy. "We've secured approval," he shouted. "Work restarts today." He strode toward the curb, chest puffed, but his voice cracked when he saw 24 neighbors in folding chairs staring back. I walked forward with my binder. "Let's read together." I flipped open to the instrument page, reading aloud the historic easement number, the stop work code, and the title insurer's conditions. "This paper says I can," he barked, shoving his sheaf toward me. "That paper isn't recorded," I answered, holding up the county-stamped easement. "This one is." The crew foreman glanced at the red order on my fence. "No title insurance, no job," he muttered, signaling his men to stand down. From the chairs, a low chant rose. "Show the permit, show the permit." No screaming, no anger, just steady, lawful demand. Reporters snapped photos of the scene, a block of neighbors facing down a realtor's fury with nothing but paperwork and coffee cups. Minutes later, the inspector's truck rolled up. He climbed out, reviewed Mortaine's stack, then opened my binder. He read the easement number aloud and tapped the stop work notice. "No demolition until historic review complete and easement holder consents." His voice was loud enough for the live stream mic to catch every word. Nerida stepped up with the neighbor's joint letter.
Filed and signed, she said, handing it over. The inspector logged it into his file. Who was the easement holder of record? He asked. I am, I said. Then you call the play. I looked directly at Breyer and Morton. Work ceases. Any further harassment triggers a temporary restraining order. I walked calmly to the contractor's truck and taped a red copy of the stop work to the windshield. Phones snapped pictures before Mortain could rip it down. One neighbor, live streaming, caught my words. This isn't about nostalgia. It's about law, memory, and dignity. The feed jumped to hundreds of views in minutes. By noon, the shift was visible. Breyer packed up quietly, muttering to his men about liability and insurance. One contractor whispered, "No coverage, no paycheck." Within half an hour, the trucks were gone. A text buzzed on my phone. Tavros's assistant. Withdrawn. 2 syllables, but it carried the weight of surrender. Mortain, though, was not done. He turned to Druella, who had slipped into the background, and hissed, "Traitor." She didn't answer. She just looked at the mulberry tree, leaves swaying above her, and stayed silent. Reporters moved in, asking questions. Quillen gave them his steady inspector's summary. Nerita spoke of memory and dignity. When the microphone swung to me, I kept it plain. "How did you stop the bulldozer?" one asked. "I didn't," I said. "The law did. We just showed up with paper." By mid-afternoon, the Ledger ran a breaking story online. Community sit-in halts demo. Easement blocks flip. Photos of lawn chairs and the red notice went viral. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits in a folding chair. By sunset, the street was quiet again. Neighbors folded their chairs, packed up their thermoses, and drifted home. The air smelled of mulberry and coffee, traces of resolve lingering like smoke after a campfire. I sat on the porch bench, the wood still warm from the day. Druella approached once more. Her voice was thin, brittle. "I didn't know he'd go this far." "Now you do," I answered. "Choices are yours." She nodded, but didn't step closer. She turned and walked down the sidewalk alone. I stayed seated, letting the silence settle. I reread Dad's letter one more time. Guard the roots. The words were as sharp as the day he wrote them. Survival is not bitterness. It's boundary. Forgiveness is optional. Boundaries are mandatory. I emailed Varric a thank you, uploaded the final set of photos and videos, and closed the binder. It was heavy now. Thick proof that I was not erased. They thought marriage bought them a house. Instead, it bought me clarity. If family means erasing you, that's not family. If neighbors sit with you, that's community. And if paper speaks for you, that's justice. They came with a bulldozer. We answered with a block that refused to move.